Chapter 1, Prologue. The hug. A gentle drizzle descended continuously upon the cobblestone streets of Portland, Oregon, resembling a delicate curtain spread over the somber sky. The late October air was imbued with the familiar chill that defines the Pacific Northwest in autumn. Emily Carter, 29, emerged from the back door of Powell's Books, the renowned used bookstore of the city, pulling a hefty black trash bag along with her. She donned a weathered yellow raincoat with frayed sleeves, her moist light brown hair adhering to her cheeks. The worn rubber boots thudded against the ground, producing gentle squelches on the damp pavement of the alley that wound its way behind St. Mary's Church. Her breath escaped in delicate white puffs against the frigid air. She took a moment to pause, gazing at the vivid red maple leaves quivering in the rain as if they were also striving to cling to the final remnants of warmth before the impending winter. In the midst of her bustling workday, a rare moment of tranquility emerged as she sorted through old books, engaged in conversation with customers, and occasionally found solace in a quiet corner, lost in the pages of a book. Yet, a peculiar noise shattered the silence, a muffled, fractured cry reverberating from the dark recesses of the alley. Emily inclined her head, attuned to the sounds around her. The weeping was soft, yet it resonated with a deep sorrow reminiscent of a long-buried hurt resurfacing. She placed the trash bag on the ground, cleaned her hands on her worn canvas apron, and moved deliberately toward the noise. The rain drenched her coat, causing a slight shiver to run through her, yet she remained unfazed. There was something in that cry that tugged at her heart, an unexplainable instinct awakening within her. As she approached, the soft light of a far-off street lamp revealed a silhouette. A figure slouched next to a dumpster, his head lowered, shoulders trembling. He donned a costly black suit, yet it appeared untidy, drenched, and marked by the earth. His polished leather shoes were smeared with mud, and his hand grasped a small, shining object, a gold wedding ring, left behind on the pavement like a forsaken vow. He kept his gaze down, tears streaming silently, his muffled sobs betraying the anguish he desperately sought to conceal from those around him. Emily paused, her breath harmonizing with the rhythmic drizzle of the rain. She was unaware of his identity or the circumstances that had brought a man in such a refined suit to this shattered condition, yet she recognized that sensation, the profound sense of loss, of void, reminiscent of the moments spent by the graves of her parents and younger brother after the car accident 7 years prior, or the heartache of finding her fiancé, the one she had trusted implicitly, in the arms of her best friend within the apartment they had envisioned as their future together. 3 years after ending her engagement, she had discovered the strength to move forward, not by erasing the past, but by embracing those who sought her support. At this moment, it was evident that this man was in need of someone to lean on. With a decisive movement, Emily advanced and lowered herself to kneel beside him. Her knees met the frigid earth, rainwater trickling through her delicate jeans, yet she remained oblivious. She rested her hand on his shoulder softly, reminiscent of the way she had once consoled children wandering in the bookstore, searching for their mothers. He recoiled slightly, glancing up for a moment, his eyes glistening with a mix of tears and rain, before bowing his head once more, as if embarrassed to reveal his vulnerability. Yet Emily remained. She embraced him gently, a warm hold that conveyed her presence without overwhelming him. The aroma of his luxurious cologne intertwined with the moist earth and rain, crafting an unforgettable scent that lingered in her memory. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered, her voice gentle yet resolute. He remained silent, but she sensed his body slowly easing in her embrace, his tears subsiding, merging with the rhythmic patter of the rain. They lingered in silence, two unknown souls, devoid of identity, bound solely by the weight of their mutual suffering in the shadows of the alley. Emily remained silent, showing no curiosity about his identity or the events that had transpired. For her, there were moments when a hug conveyed emotions that words simply could not express. At last, when his cries faded into silence, Emily released her grip. He remained focused on the ground, quietly using a damp sleeve to cleanse his face. She rose with the intention of departing, yet her gaze was drawn to the wedding ring resting on the ground. It was small, shimmering beneath the streetlight, reminiscent of a fragment from a broken aspiration. She lowered herself to retrieve it, her icy fingers gliding over the chilled metal. Uncertain of her motives, perhaps driven by an innate urge or a spark of curiosity, she stealthily placed the ring into his suit pocket and then walked away, leaving silence in her wake. As she made her way to the back door of Powell's, the rain fell in a constant cadence, reminiscent of a silent, melancholic melody. She cast a final look over her shoulder. The man remained still, yet the ring had found its way into his pocket, a puzzle she hesitated to solve. She shut the door behind her and made her way back to the bookstore where the aged shelves and the scent of musty paper greeted her. Yet deep within her, an unusual sensation remained, as if that embrace had not solely been for him, but for her as well, a fragment of herself she had long concealed. As Emily entered, she removed her raincoat and draped it over the wooden hook by the door, unveiling a modest gray sweater beneath. She swept her damp hair away from her face, droplets cascading down her fingers, and released a gentle sigh. This was not the first occasion she had extended a hand to a stranger, offering assistance without any anticipation of reward. For her, it was the sole path to ensure her heart continued to beat after all she had endured. Emily, 29, embodied a gentle spirit and kindness, yet she bore scars that time could never erase. 7 years ago, her world crumbled as she lost her entire family, her father, mother, and little brother, in a tragic car accident on I-5. A driver under the influence collided with their vehicle while returning from a camping excursion in Tillamook Forest, a journey she would have participated in had it not been for a weekend shift at Powell's. She endured, yet the price was countless nights spent in restless contemplation of why she had not been by their side. Then 3 years ago, just as that old wound was beginning to mend, a new one ripped open. Ethan, her college fiancé, the man she had envisioned a future with, shattered her trust. She discovered him wrapped in the arms of Sarah, her closest friend since high school, in the apartment they had chosen together merely 2 months prior to their wedding. Emily ended the engagement without hesitation, returned the ring she had once held dear, and severed all connections. Since then, she had embraced a serene existence at Powell's Books, where the whispers of old books and the narratives of others provided her solace. She never pursued affection or recognition, yet she consistently offered her support to those who required it. Whether it was patiently assisting a customer in locating a rare book or quietly preparing bundles of used books to send to underprivileged children in rural Oregon. For Emily, kindness was a natural part of her being, effortlessly woven into her interactions. It was the delicate connection anchoring her to reality and maybe the sole path she recognized for her own healing. Chapter 2. The Abandoned Bridegroom. The following morning, Portland stirred to an unusual, vibrant energy. The rain had ceased, leaving behind glistening puddles on the pavement and a subtle aroma of moist soil lingering in the atmosphere. Emily stood behind the counter at Powell's Books, flipping through the pages of an old book about Northwest trees, when Jade, her short-haired, green-dyed coworker, strode in and slapped the latest issue of Willamette Week onto the counter with a loud thwack. Her voice filled with enthusiasm. "Have you come across this?" Emily lifted her gaze, her warm brown eyes examining the striking headline. Tech mogul Alexander Reed was abandoned at the altar. Fiancé disappears just before the ceremony. Below lay a hazy image of a man in formal attire, poised in front of a sophisticated yet unoccupied wedding reception table. The piece elaborated on the story of Alexander Reed, 32, the CEO of a notable social tech firm who faced the heart-wrenching experience of being left by his fiancée right before their wedding at an opulent hotel. In downtown Portland, silence reigns, leaving no evidence behind. The bride vanished without a trace just 2 hours prior to the vows. Jade chuckled softly, her head shaking in amusement. "Is this the kind of drama you're referring to? The entire city will be alive with excitement for a week. They claim he's as frigid as ice, yet being abandoned in such a manner likely turned him into mere water." Emily offered a subtle smile yet remained silent. She had little interest in idle chatter, but the name Alexander Reed evoked a peculiar sensation within her, reminiscent of a missing piece in a complex puzzle. With a gentle sigh, she set the book aside and redirected her focus to the task at hand, meticulously organizing a pile of children's books destined for the Gresham Community Library by the weekend. The news swept across Portland with astonishing speed. By noon, Stumptown Coffee, just a few blocks from Powell's, was alive with the soft murmur of hipster groups cradling their artfully crafted lattes, animatedly chatting about the jilted billionaire. Some quipped that he might have coded an AI bride that malfunctioned and erased itself. As social media buzzed, the hashtag #ReedLeftAtAltar surged in popularity, accompanied by paparazzi images capturing his departure from the hotel. Expressionless, gaze obscured by dark shades. Yet, unbeknownst to anyone, the evening prior he had found himself collapsed in the shadows of the alley behind St. Mary's Church, cradled in the embrace of an unfamiliar figure. And Emily, the one who had embraced him, remained unaware that the name splashed across the headlines referred to that very man. 3 days later, the bell above Powell's door chimed softly as a man entered the space. Emily balanced on a weathered wooden ladder, cradling a pile of hardcovers when the sound of deliberate footsteps drew near. As she turned, her heart fluttered unexpectedly. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood there, clad in a dark gray wool coat, replacing the drenched black suit she had observed earlier. His dark hair was meticulously styled, yet his deep blue eyes, free from the redness of fatigue, still reflected the exhaustion of countless sleepless nights. In his grasp lay a wrinkled piece of paper adorned with a handful of scrawled lines. "Pardon me," he murmured, his voice deep and a touch raspy. "Is the alchemist here?" Emily placed the books aside and descended from the ladder, immediately identifying him, not from the newspaper image, but from the subtle way his shoulders drooped, as if he were still carrying an unseen burden. This was the man from the alley, the one she had embraced in the rain, never inquiring about his name. She remembered that brief instant when they had shared the space together. She murmured something regarding the alchemist, how it was the book she had turned to when she felt adrift after her family's passing. She was taken aback that he not only remembered but also decided to appear here. "Do you often embrace strangers in alleys, or am I just fortunate?" He pressed on, his voice tinged with a hint of sarcasm, yet his gaze revealed a genuine curiosity, as if he were attempting to unravel her mystery. A fleeting smile danced on his lips, the first since that evening, but it disappeared just as swiftly. Emily felt a jolt, her cheeks flushing ever so slightly. She struggled with the quick exchanges, particularly this clever and surprising type. "Only when they look like they need it," she said quietly, then turned away to conceal her embarrassment, making her way to the classic literature section. She endeavored to maintain her composure even as her thoughts whirled chaotically. "His name is Alexander Reed." The figure emerging from the shadows is none other than Alexander Reed. Just as she reached for the book, a voice interrupted from the counter. "Hey, isn't that the guy who got dumped?" A customer, a man with round glasses, whispered to his friend, gesturing toward Alexander. The whispers began to circulate, inquisitive glances shifting in his direction. Alexander's grip on the scrap of paper tightened, his expression hardening, a flicker of annoyance evident in his eyes. Emily moved swiftly, stepping forward and gently pulling at his sleeve, leading him into a hidden nook behind the sci-fi shelves where hefty tomes shielded them from the bustling crowd. "Don't mind them," she murmured softly, her voice soothing. "Portland thrives on drama, but it will fade from memory before long." He gazed at her, truly gazed at her for the first time, not as a mere observer, but as someone seeking to grasp a deeper truth. "You appear accustomed to rescuing others," he remarked, his tone softened, the sarcasm fading, giving way to a touch of earnestness. "Let's say I am," she replied, then turned back to the shelf, retrieving a well-loved paperback of The Alchemist and offering it to him. Her hand quivered just a bit, but she concealed it. "This is my preferred edition. Though it isn't fresh, it carries a certain essence." Alexander grasped the book, his fingers gliding over the cover as if assessing its worth. "Thanks," he said quietly, yet his eyes held onto hers for a moment longer than expected. He omitted any reference to the hug, and she followed suit, yet an unspoken understanding lingered between them. This encounter was not their inaugural one, nor was it likely to be the final chapter. As he departed, the door's bell chimed once more. Emily lingered by the shelves, clutching a book she intended to organize, her gaze fixed through Powell's expansive glass window as he ventured out onto the street. His tall figure merged seamlessly with the crowd. Alexander Reed, she mused, the name now vivid in her thoughts. To her, he was neither the billionaire nor the jilted groom splashed across the headlines. He was merely the figure from the alley, the one who had abandoned a ring and posed a question she had yet to resolve. Alexander Reed, 32, was an individual who navigated a realm defined by reason and authority. As the leader of a social tech company in Portland, he was recognized for his aloof demeanor and commitment to privacy. He constructed his empire from the ground up, utilizing keen insight and a remarkable knack for anticipating trends. Few were aware that he had been raised in a fractured household where love was a rare commodity he never experienced. His fiancée, Sophia, had departed before the wedding, unable to cope with the relentless media scrutiny and his emotional distance, a devastating blow that left him feeling unmoored for the first time. Emily's embrace in the alley caught him off guard, and The Alchemist was the reason for his return, not merely for the book, but for a glimmer of hope in the shadows he wasn't prepared to acknowledge. Chapter 3: Uncomfortable Introductions. In the days after their initial meeting at Powell's Books, Alexander Reed started appearing more frequently, an unacknowledged routine that neither he nor Emily spoke about. Initially, he arrived with straightforward justifications, purchasing books, often those Emily had referenced during their fleeting encounter in the rain, such as The Alchemist or other timeless tales exploring the quest for life's purpose. Yet over time, he found himself staying longer, not merely to peruse but to engage in conversation, although their exchanges frequently began with discomfort and concluded in quietude. Emily was unfazed. She relished the serene tranquility of those instances, him positioned by the shelves, perusing pages with a calm intensity as she organized vintage books or scribbled thoughts in her petite notebook. Powell's, with its towering shelves and the subtle aroma of damp paper wafting through the air, emerged as their rendezvous, spontaneous and unforeseen, marked only by the shared presence of two souls who had once connected over their sorrows on a rainy evening. Emily maintained a thoughtful distance, refraining from probing too deeply, never urging him to elaborate beyond succinct comments about literature or the climate in Portland. She suggested some of her favorite healing books. The Alchemist was her top choice, trailed by Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning and The Night Circus with its subtle enchantment. Yet she never inquired about the reasons behind his persistent visits, although she could speculate on some of them. As he grasped the copy of The Alchemist he had purchased the previous week, he turned to the first page and inquired, "Do you truly believe that the universe assists us in discovering what we desire?" Emily smiled and said, "I think that sometimes we need to prioritize our own well-being, and then the universe will align accordingly." He remained silent, offering only a slight nod, yet his gaze held onto her for an extended moment, as if contemplating something more profound. Not everyone felt as comfortable with Alexander's presence as Emily did. Jade, 25, her closest companion and colleague at Powell's, regarded him with a wary gaze each time he entered the room. Small in stature, with short green hair dyed in a bold hue, often clad in indie band t-shirts and sporting a nose ring, Jade was the kind of person who expressed her thoughts freely, occasionally crossing into uncomfortable territory. One afternoon, after Alexander departed following a brief conversation with Emily about sci-fi books, Jade drew her to the corner of the counter, her voice low yet cautious. "He's a man of immense wealth, Em. Alexander Reed, the man everyone in Portland is buzzing about for being jilted at the altar. Do you believe he's genuine, or merely exploiting your generosity?" Emily furrowed her brow, placing her pen aside. "Could you clarify what you mean?" Jade folded her arms, her gaze piercing. "I mean, you have such a kind nature and he's... Who can say? Wealthy individuals rarely meander through second-hand bookstores in search of kindred spirits. Once, I fell victim to a con artist who presented himself as a creative genius and managed to deceive me. It became clear that his only intention was to collect the rent money. I wish to protect you from pain once more." Emily let out a deep breath. She understood that Jade had good intentions. Jade recounted her experience of a fleeting romance with a lackluster musician who vanished after taking some money from her. He never settled the debt, yet she merely shook her head in response. "He doesn't possess those qualities. I'm uncertain about his intentions, but I'm only offering book recommendations." Jade exhaled sharply, urging caution, before turning back to her tasks, leaving Emily with a momentary uncertainty that swiftly dissipated. The bond between Emily and Alexander deepened, gradually and cautiously, akin to two unfamiliar souls attempting to traverse an unseen barrier. On a tempestuous evening, as Portland was shrouded in the damp winds sweeping in from the Willamette River, Alexander made his way to Powell's later than he typically would, his dark gray wool coat drenched, black hair cascading onto the floor. The shop was approaching its closing hour, with just a handful of lingering patrons. Jade departed early, unable to endure the chill. Emily was organizing the counter when he entered, bringing with him the aroma of rain and a trace of solitude. "I didn't think you'd show up in this weather," she remarked, a blend of jest and sincerity in her tone. He gave a slight shrug. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. For the first time she sensed a crack in his icy shell. Their hours stretched into the night as the neon lights outside danced through the expansive glass window, casting reflections of raindrops cascading down. In an attempt to shatter the stillness, Alexander made his way to the vintage coffee machine nestled in the corner, a remnant from the 80s that Powell's staff clung to, despite its constant malfunctions. "Care for a cup of coffee?" he inquired, gripping the stained glass pot. Emily nodded, intrigued to watch him grapple with a device that even she found perplexing. He clumsily poured the beans, mispressing the buttons, and then, in a frantic attempt to rectify his mistake, he spilled hot water across the counter, leaving a dark stain to seep into the wood. Frustration escaped his lips the first time she witnessed him unravel, and she found herself unable to resist the moment. She erupted in laughter, a vibrant sound slicing through the silence. Alexander glanced upward, taken aback, and then a fleeting smile danced at the corners of his mouth. "Surely, I can't be that terrible, can I?" Emily shook her head, a smile dancing on her lips as laughter bubbled up inside her. "No, you simply appear as a child tackling chores for the very first time." In that moment, beneath Powell's warm golden glow, he gazed at her as if she were the first rays of sunlight breaking through a long winter, and she, though reluctant to acknowledge it, sensed her heart begin to lift. That evening, after the coffee machine finally decided to cooperate, they found themselves seated across from one another, steaming mugs in hand, when Alexander unexpectedly began to share his thoughts. She departed, unable to bear the weight of the pressure, he remarked, gaze fixed on his cup, tone devoid of emotion as if narrating a tale belonging to another. The media, cohabitating with someone like me, aloof, detached, she remarked. I hold no resentment towards her, yet I'm at a loss for how to change my ways. Emily listened intently, her grip on the mug firm, then responded with a voice that was gentle yet unwavering. I once believed I fell short of expectations. My former fiancé betrayed me with my closest friend just before our wedding day. I pondered over my missteps only to come to the understanding that the blame did not lie with me. I navigated through it by offering support to others as that shifted my focus away from my own suffering. Alexander lifted his gaze, locking eyes with hers, and in that moment they transcended mere strangers, they became two fractured souls striving to mend their shattered selves. As he departed, the rain continued to pour relentlessly beyond the window. Emily lingered at the counter, observing as his silhouette gradually disappeared beyond the glass. She was uncertain about what was unfolding between them, yet she sensed a change. Nothing extravagant or distinct, merely a subtle glimmer, reminiscent of Powell's glow on aged book pages, sufficient to ignite her anticipation for the next occasion. Chapter 4, the start of something warm. As time went on, the clumsy meetings between Emily and Alexander at Powell's books evolved into a significant aspect of their lives, even if they never spoke of it openly. On a brisk November afternoon, as Portland held onto the refreshing bite of autumn, Alexander entered the bookstore with a rare sense of purpose, clutching a small ticket marked with the emblem of the Portland Book Festival, the city's premier literary gathering where writers, publishers, and countless bibliophiles converged annually. He placed the ticket on the counter where Emily was meticulously labeling a stack of old books and said in a calm, measured tone, "Join me next week." Emily glanced upward, her light brown eyes sparkling with astonishment, then she shook her head gently, a subtle smile gracing her lips. Crowds have never been my strong suit, as you well know. A multitude of individuals packed into a convention center. The mere thought of it feels stifling. Alexander tilted his head, unwavering in his resolve. I'm not a fan of crowds myself, but I figured you might appreciate the used bookstalls in that area. There's even a dedicated area for children's literature, similar to the ones you distribute. She observed him closely, catching a glimmer in his gaze. Not the typical aloofness, but an uncommon authenticity. Yet she still chose to decline. I'll consider it, but temper your expectations. He persisted far more than she had anticipated. Throughout the following week, Alexander visited Powell's nearly every day, each time armed with a fresh excuse to entice her. One day, he brought up a beloved author who would be signing books. Another time, he spoke of a rare bookstall featuring imports from Europe. On one occasion, he simply lingered by the shelves, posing the question, "Aren't you even a little curious?" Emily started to see the humor in his persistence, yet it also began to weaken her determination. At last, on a Saturday morning, he arrived with a new flyer, not for the book festival, but for a book donation event aimed at rural Oregon children at a quaint suburban library. She let out a sigh, placing her pen down on the counter. All right, but only this, no festivities, no throngs of people. Alexander beamed, a seldom-seen smile illuminating his features. I had a feeling you would agree. On that day, the sky over Portland unexpectedly brightened as the weeks of unyielding rain finally yielded to a rare burst of sunshine that danced through the vivid red maple leaves lining the road to the suburbs. Emily settled into the passenger seat of Alexander's polished black SUV, a hint of unease washing over her as she departed from the comfort of Powell's, venturing into uncharted territory. A small town appeared on the horizon, just 40 minutes from the bustling city where dedicated volunteers were busy arranging a book donation booth outside the welcoming community library. The ambience was vibrant yet not overpowering, featuring wooden tables stacked with children's literature, a handful of kids scurrying around unopened boxes, and the aroma of coffee drifting from a quaint indie cafe across the street. Emily immediately sensed a wave of comfort wash over her. She emerged from the car, gently holding a box filled with cherished old books from Powell's that she had selected earlier, including titles such as The Very Hungry Caterpillar and Charlotte's Web, tales she was certain would delight the children. Alexander, despite his unfamiliarity with such occasions, chose not to remain a mere observer. He assisted her in organizing the books on the table, his fingers typically accustomed to the rhythm of typing, awkwardly handling the volumes, sometimes letting a few slip from his grasp for her to retrieve. "You don't have to do this," she said, but he merely shrugged in response. "I didn't arrive here to be a spectator." They toiled in quietude for a time until a cluster of children, perhaps 5 or 6, clad in vibrant autumn jackets, dashed over, their eyes wide with curiosity as they gazed at the books. A girl with curly hair, around 6 years old, pointed at where the wild things are and inquired, "Can you read it to us, mister?" Alexander stood still, casting a look at Emily for assistance, but she smiled playfully and thrust the book into his grasp. "Come on, it's easy." He picked up the book, settled onto a modest wooden chair surrounded by the children, and began to read in his resonant voice, even though it was evident he lacked the finesse of a true storyteller. On the night when Max donned his wolf suit, he stirred up trouble of a unique sort. He took a moment, trying to unleash a fearsome growl that came out more like a cough, which sent the children into fits of laughter. Emily lingered by the coffee table, cradling a paper cup of steaming latte, her laughter bubbling forth uncontrollably. A vibrant, crystalline note resonating in the tranquil atmosphere. Alexander glanced upward, pretending to scowl. "What's amusing?" Yet even he couldn't maintain his seriousness, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth as he witnessed her joy. The children cheered and yelled, "Continue on, creature of might." He complied, infusing a touch more emotion into his actions, yet still awkward enough to topple a nearby water cup. Emily observed him, sunlight pouring through the cafe window, and for the first time she realized he was no longer the distant figure from the alley. He was an individual gradually discovering the art of vulnerability. The donation event concluded by late afternoon as the sun sank behind the far-off hills, casting a stunning orange hue across Oregon's sky. During the drive back, Alexander fell into a contemplative silence for a moment before abruptly stating, "I've never experienced anything quite like today." For others, it seems to be without benefit. Emily glanced at him, a hint of surprise flickering in her eyes. "What prompted you to do that?" He maintained his gaze on the road ahead, his tone soft yet resolute. "Due to your influence. Your effortless approach makes assisting others seem like the most instinctive act imaginable." She held back her response, simply smiling, a warmth enveloping her like the rare sunshine of that day. A couple of weeks later, Alexander astonished her once more. One morning, he arrived at Powell's, not clutching a book or seeking answers, but carrying a grander vision. Motivated by the donation event, he financed a mobile library, a compact truck brimming with books to reach the isolated regions of Oregon where children seldom received fresh reading materials. "It will commence next month," he remarked, his hands tucked into his coat pockets, attempting to minimize his sense of accomplishment. Emily stood behind the counter, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Is that so?" "You're absolutely right." He nodded, then retrieved a small wooden box from his pocket and gently pushed it toward her. "This is meant for you." As she unveiled it, an antique book press came into view, its polished walnut surface adorned with intricate carvings, an object she had once envisioned using to breathe new life into her cherished old books at the shop. Her hands shook as she reached for it, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Alexander, I'm at a loss for words." He shrugged, his voice a gentle whisper. "No need to say a word. I simply believed it was meant to be with you." As he departed, Emily remained silently by the counter, clutching the book press, her eyes fixed on the expansive glass window of Powell's. The elusive sunlight of Portland poured in, casting a warm glow on the aged shelves, and she sensed a fresh start not only for him but for herself as well. Alexander had transformed from the shattered figure in the alley, and she had evolved beyond merely being a healer of others. In unison, they were crafting a sense of warmth, even if it was merely the beginning. Chapter 5, Echoes of the past winter descended upon Portland sooner than expected, ushering in sharp winds that coursed through the cobblestone streets and shook the expansive glass windows of Powell's books. Emily stood behind the counter, sorting a stack of newly arrived books, her heart buoyant after the sunlit days shared with Alexander. Their relationship lacked a label or promises, yet she sensed a deepening connection, something real, though not love just yet, like two flawed puzzle pieces finding their place together. Alexander continued to frequent Powell's, occasionally bringing along coffee from Stumptown, other times simply lingering by the shelves and inquiring about the cherished old books. She started to wonder if, despite all her losses, she was finally discovering a sense of belonging. On a late November afternoon, the sky was gray and a steady drizzle pattered on Powell's roof when the shop's door jingled. A woman entered, not just an ordinary customer, but a presence that instantly thickened the atmosphere. She stood tall, her glossy blonde hair swept up high, draped in an opulent cream fur coat, the sound of her high heels echoing rhythmically against the wooden floor. Emily glanced up, a hint of surprise flickering across her face, yet her demeanor remained calm. Her attention shifted as the woman strode purposefully toward the quiet corner where Alexander lingered, clutching a copy of Dune that he had planned to purchase. "Alex," her voice echoed, gentle yet piercing, "I need to speak with you." Emily stood motionless, her fingers lingering on the spine of a book, and then realization washed over her. This was Sophia, the woman who had once been engaged to Alexander, the one who had abandoned him on their wedding day, the one who had become the talk of the town in Portland. Alexander placed the book aside, his expression tightening, his intense blue eyes gleaming with annoyance. "Sophia," he uttered, his tone frigid, "what is it that you desire?" Sophia moved nearer, her hands intertwined as though seeking balance. "I regret my decision to leave, Alex. I realize now that it was a mistake. The weight of it all, the scrutiny, the constant attention, it became overwhelming. Yet, after much reflection, I've come to terms with it. I wish to return and make amends." Her voice quivered, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, yet Alexander interrupted her, shaking his head firmly. "I'm afraid, Sophia, that I really don't wish to listen to that. You made your decision to go, and I've come to terms with it. There's nothing remaining for us now." Sophia remained motionless, her lips sealed, then she pivoted, but not without murmuring, "You'll regret this." Emily never intended to listen in. In the dimly lit back stockroom just a few meters away, she stood with a box of old books she intended to organize on the shelves. Through a narrow gap in the door, she inadvertently observed everything, the way Sophia's fingers brushed against his shoulder, the brief flicker of uncertainty in his eyes before he ultimately declined. Her chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from a familiar fear creeping back in, the fear that she wasn't enough, that she was merely a placeholder, a fleeting remedy for a shattered heart. She retreated slightly, resting against the shelves, her unsteady hand grazing the copy of The Alchemist she always held dear, as if it were a protective charm. The words of the book resonated within her thoughts. "When you desire something, the entire universe aligns to assist you." In that fleeting moment, she pondered whether the universe genuinely desired her presence, or if she was merely deceiving herself. Throughout the remainder of the day, Emily found it impossible to concentrate. She let a book slip from her hands, confused a customer's coffee order, and when Alexander came to the counter to check on her, she managed a strained smile. "I'm doing well, just feeling a bit weary." He didn't press, but his gaze, once lively when he read to the children, now seemed suffocating. She started to reconsider it all, his trips to Powell's, the tales he recounted, the book press he had gifted her. Was he merely employing her as a means to move on from Sophia? Was she just a temporary presence, a gentle spirit he relied on in moments of solitude? The thought settled in her mind like a small knife piercing through old scars, the car accident that claimed her family, Ethan's betrayal. She reminded herself, "I can't let it happen again." That evening in her cozy East Portland apartment, Emily stood in front of her cherished bookshelf, her fingers gliding over the spine of The Alchemist, her vision clouded by tears. She remembered his remarks regarding Sophia. She struggled with my aloofness, questioning whether he had genuinely turned her down or if it was merely a fleeting moment of doubt he might eventually rethink. She opened the book, revisiting her favorite line, "When you want something, yet this time it failed to bring her solace." With a decisive motion, she closed it firmly, took her seat at the table, and began to compose a resignation letter addressed to the manager at Powell's. She realized she couldn't continue being a fleeting solution for someone, even if that someone was Alexander. She made the choice to depart, not only from Powell's but also from Portland, heading to Seattle, where a nonprofit educational organization had extended a job offer to her months prior. It presented an opportunity for a fresh beginning, a chance to dedicate herself to aiding others while safeguarding her heart from further harm. Jade was the first to find out, and her reaction was far from positive. The following morning, as Emily stepped into Powell's to hand in her letter, Jade pulled her toward the corner of the counter, her tone cutting through the air. "What are you up to, Em? Giving up? Relocating? Is it really just because that billionaire had a conversation with his former love?" Emily let out a deep breath, attempting to clarify her thoughts. "It's not about him, Jade. This is a reflection of my experiences. I wish to avoid falling into that pattern once more, placing my trust in someone only to discover that I fall short." Jade folded her arms, her gaze sharp and intense. "You consistently offer support to those around you, providing comfort and restoration. Why not you? By fleeing in this manner, you're allowing him to triumph or permitting the past to prevail." Emily shook her head, her voice soft yet resolute. "I refuse to surrender. I simply require some time to determine my desires." Jade sighed, glancing back briefly, but not before whispering, "I'll miss you, though I can't stand how you're leaving like this." Before departing from Portland, Emily took a final action. As the night deepened and Powell's had locked its doors, she quietly employed her staff key to gain entry. She made her way to the quiet nook where Alexander frequently lingered, setting the alchemist down on the modest table he utilized for his reading, accompanied by a handwritten note. "Discover your hidden gem." She penned no further words, provided no rationale, and silently departed, taking with her the book press he had gifted and a modest suitcase filled with clothes. The following day, she stepped onto a Greyhound bus bound for Seattle, gazing out the window as Portland slipped away behind the hills, her heart a mix of emptiness and relief. Uncertainty clouded her thoughts, yet a clear need for distance emerged, distance from Alexander, from Powell's, and from the fragile hope she had started to nurture. Returning to Portland, Alexander entered Powell's a few days later, searching for her as he typically did, only to discover Jade behind the counter, her expression icy. "She's gone," Jade remarked, pushing the alchemist in his direction. "She has left this for you." He picked up the book, glanced at her note, and for the first time in months, an inexplicable emptiness washed over him, not due to Sophia but because of Emily, who had departed without a farewell. Chapter 6. The search. On the day Emily departed, Alexander remained oblivious, engrossed in meetings and the arrangements for the mobile library he had financed in her honor. As he entered Powell's Books one weekend afternoon, clutching his usual Stumptown coffee, an unsettling feeling washed over him. The counter stood bare, devoid of Emily's warm smile or skilled hands arranging the books. Jade remained in place, her expression icy, and before he had the chance to inquire, she pushed the alchemist in his direction, her tone devoid of emotion. "She has departed, leaving this for you." He picked up the book, his fingers gliding over Emily's handwritten note. "Discover your hidden gem." For the very first time, Alexander Reed, a man who had always maintained his composure, experienced a surge of panic. He turned to Jade, his voice filled with urgency. "Where has it gone? When will it be?" Jade gave a nonchalant shrug. "Recently in Seattle." She remained quite reserved, "But I would speculate it's due to you and that blonde former partner of yours." He remained motionless, the weight of the book pressing down on him, a tide of grief enveloping him like never before since Sophia's departure. Yet this time it pierced more profoundly as he came to understand too late that it was not merely pain. It was love, a feeling he failed to acknowledge until she had departed. Alexander was restless. He departed from Powell's without delay. The alchemist slipped the item into his coat pocket and set off through Portland, searching for her as though she could be concealed somewhere within the city's depths. He drove to the office but discovered only quiet shelves and unfamiliar faces turning pages. He visited Voodoo Donut, recalling the time she had purchased a box of pink frosted donuts for the kids at the donation event, and inquired with the staff if they had spotted a girl with light brown hair wearing a yellow raincoat. Yet they merely shook their heads, preoccupied with a seemingly unending stream of patrons. He visited Powell's every day, yearning for Jade to soften and provide him with additional hints. Yet she gazed at him, her expression a blend of fury and compassion. "She wishes to remain hidden from you, Reed. Allow her to be." Yet he found himself unable to, the book she had entrusted to him resting heavily in his hands, a constant reminder, a compass whose directions eluded him. As time flowed, Portland transformed into a labyrinth of recollections. Each street corner, every cafe, evokes memories of her. On a drizzly morning, as he strolled through the Pearl District, he caught sight of a girl with brown hair emerging from a quaint flower shop, clad in a faded yellow raincoat. His heart raced with intensity. He called out, "Emily." Across the street, his voice resonated amidst the steady rhythm of traffic and the gentle drumming of rain. The girl turned, yet it was not Emily. Merely an unfamiliar face with wide, astonished eyes gazing at him as if he had completely lost his sanity. "Apologies," he muttered, averting his gaze, his cheeks flushed with shame, yet a foolish glimmer of hope ignited within him that she could still be close by. He lingered in the rain, gripping the alchemist tucked away in his pocket, pondering whether she had genuinely departed or if he simply hadn't discovered the right moment. Following a week of unproductive searching in Portland, Alexander expanded his quest. He remembered a fleeting exchange when Emily brought up Seattle. She had previously mentioned a non-profit educational organization that had extended a job offer to her, which she declined in favor of remaining at Powell's. It was his sole clue, and he acted without a moment's pause. He navigated I-5, the lengthy 170-plus-mile journey from Portland to Seattle, clutching her book like a cherished relic, his heart weighed down yet resolute in his course. Seattle welcomed him under a sky of muted gray, reminiscent of Portland's, yet the energy here surged with a quicker rhythm, a cacophony of sounds, and skyscrapers that reached for the clouds amidst throngs of people. He felt lost, unsure of how to begin. He meandered through neighborhoods, explored public libraries and used bookstores, and even inquired at Pike Place Market, clinging to the faint hope that someone might have caught a glimpse of her. Yet no one had ever heard of an Emily Carter, and he started to feel like a fool pursuing a phantom she had no intention of revealing. On a weekend afternoon, just as he was ready to abandon his search, he noticed a flyer affixed to a lamppost near Capitol Hill. It announced an event hosted by a nonprofit educational group, Story Time for Immigrant Children, aimed at enriching the community with knowledge. He felt a pull, an instinct urging him forward, even if he couldn't confirm whether it was her organization or not. He made his way to the destination, a cozy community center adorned with soft yellow walls where the joyful sounds of children's laughter flowed out into the air. Upon entering, with the alchemist still clutched in his grasp, he was greeted by a familiar voice, soft yet distinct, reciting words with clarity. And then the boy understood. At times the most enchanting experiences aren't found within the pages of books, but rather in the individuals you encounter. He stood motionless in the doorway, his heart racing in his chest. Emily sat amidst a circle of immigrant children, cradling the boy who had tumbled from the Mayflower, her eyes sparkling with the magic of the tale she wove. She donned a modest gray sweater, her light brown hair casually tied back, and her smile, the very one he remembered from his awkward reading of Where the Wild Things Are, made him lose track of his surroundings. The children applauded as she concluded, and she stood before them, speaking in a gentle tone, reminding them that books don't mend individuals, rather, it is people who mend one another. Alexander felt a constriction in his throat, the book he held quivering as the truth he had long denied washed over him. He cherished her not solely for rescuing him in that alley, but because she inspired him to strive for a better version of himself. He advanced cautiously, his voice caught in his throat, remaining still in the room, observing her from a distance, fearful that any movement would cause her to disappear once more. Emily turned, and their gazes locked in an unspoken connection. She paused, her grip on the book tightening, her expression shifting through a whirlwind of feelings, surprise, confusion, and then a flicker of something resembling pain. She remained silent, her gaze fixed, leaving him uncertain of where to start. Yet the alchemist she had entrusted to him, the one that came with "Find your treasure," now seemed like the solution he had been seeking. He discovered his true treasure, not within his surroundings, nor in the possessions he once deemed significant, but in her, the one who departed and compelled him to embark on a quest. He stepped closer to her, the book still in his grasp, his heart swelling with an unnamed emotion, neither hope nor fear, but a resolute conviction that, regardless of her response, he would not allow her to vanish from his life once more. Chapter 7. Reunited with a sense of purpose. The community center in Seattle hummed with the lively chatter of children as they streamed out of the room, leaving Emily standing silently among the small wooden chairs, still holding on to the boy who had tumbled off the Mayflower. Her gaze fixed on Alexander, who lingered at the entrance. With the alchemist in hand, his expression revealed a blend of determination and apprehension that was entirely new to her. The distance between them thickened, laden with the weight of all their time apart, the miscommunications, and the hurt culminating in this one poignant instant. Emily parted her lips to voice her thoughts, yet paused, uncertain of how to start. Alexander advanced, the sound of his footsteps resonating on the aged wooden floor. As he approached, he halted just a few steps away, his voice barely above a whisper, quivering with emotion. "Emily, I apologize." She frowned, a glimmer of uncertainty in her gaze, yet he pressed on, refusing to let her interject. He raised the alchemist, presenting it as evidence for the argument he was about to unfold. "I was unaware of your whereabouts, oblivious to your thoughts. However, when I witnessed you and Sophia conversing that day, I chose to redirect her attention. I stood firm, unwavering, without a moment's hesitation. She belongs to a time gone by, and I have no desire to revisit that chapter. But I was unaware that you had noticed, unaware that you believed I still had feelings. I looked for you throughout Portland, and then I arrived here, determined to clarify everything before letting you slip away." Emily remained motionless, her fingers clenching the book tighter, her heart a tumultuous mix of past sorrow and a fresh glimmer of hope. "Why didn't you mention it earlier?" she inquired, her tone soft yet incisive. He let out a soft sigh, his eyes locking onto hers. "Because I made a foolish mistake. It wasn't until your absence that I realized just how much you meant to me." A hush enveloped the room, interrupted solely by the gentle rhythm of rain tapping against the windows of the community center. Emily gazed at him, noticing the genuine warmth in those previously icy blue eyes, and sensed a fragment of her heart begin to melt. Before she had a chance to reply, Alexander stepped closer, enveloping her in a hug that was neither hesitant nor clumsy like their initial encounter in the alley. This embrace was strong and comforting, as if he were offering her everything he had to give. She tensed in astonishment yet remained still, sensing his breath softly brushing her hair. And then he murmured, his voice rough yet unwavering. That initial embrace was essential for my survival. Yet this one I had to experience fully. His words pierced her heart like a gentle knife, melting away the remnants of her uncertainty, and she embraced him tightly, her vision clouded by tears. They lingered in that stillness for what felt like an eternity, in the vacant space, resembling two wandering spirits who had at last discovered one another. As they separated, Emily brushed away her tears, presenting a subtle smile. I won't be returning to Portland solely because of that hug. Alexander chuckled, a seldom-seen grin illuminating his features. I understand, but I sincerely hope you'll allow me the opportunity to rectify the situation. She examined him closely, pausing for a moment before speaking, her tone resolute. All right, but only if you agree to one condition. Our existence isn't solely for one another. I aspire to create something grander, beyond mere books and embraces, something that truly aids individuals in the way we once experienced. Individuals seeking companionship in their moments of despair. Alexander responded with a swift nod, showing no signs of doubt. Anything you desire, I'm here to make it happen. Thus, the concept for the Hug Foundation came into existence. A nonprofit dedicated to mental health, fostering community libraries, and empowering women during challenging times. Those who had experienced loss like Emily, faced betrayal like her, or felt adrift like Alexander. They made their way back to Portland side by side, not as a conventional couple, but as allies united by a common goal. Emily returned to Powell's, this time on a part-time basis, dedicating the majority of her efforts to establishing the foundation for the organization. With his abundant resources, Alexander swiftly transformed the idea into a tangible reality. He assembled a dedicated group of mental health professionals, contacted publishers for contributions of books, and established a humble office in East Portland to serve as the main base of operations. Their choice of name, the Hug Foundation, was both simple and deeply meaningful, resonating with the embrace that had transformed their lives. Emily crafted the logo, depicting an open book with two arms in a warm embrace, while Alexander engaged with donors to launch the project successfully. However, the journey was not without its challenges. Only a few months post-launch, they encountered their initial challenge, a lack of funding. Although Alexander initially funded the project himself, the expenses associated with operating the mobile library, providing complimentary counseling sessions, and supporting women after crises significantly surpassed his projections. Initial supporters were cautious, seeking evidence of outcomes before making long-term commitments, leading to a rapid decline in funding. One evening, in the cozy confines of the Hug Foundation's modest office, Emily found herself surrounded by towering piles of paperwork, her gaze fixed nervously on the financial balance sheet. Without additional funding, we may be forced to reduce the mobile library services or, even more concerning, discontinue certain programs altogether. Alexander sat opposite her, his fingers drumming on the table as he pondered, then declared, I will sell a portion of my company shares. It's not much, but it's sufficient to sustain us for a few more months. Emily glanced upward, taken aback. Do you really think so? That belongs to you, Alexander. He shrugged, his voice steady. The entity I created to demonstrate my capabilities. This is what I wish to preserve for you, for those we are assisting. His choice invigorated the initiative, yet Emily was reluctant to place the entire burden on his shoulders. She proposed a fundraising book day at Powell's, envisioning a grand event filled with readings, used book sales, and an invitation for the Portland community to participate. She contacted Jade, who had become more receptive since her return, for assistance, and Jade readily agreed. I still believe you're a bit out there for forgiving him, but if it's for this reason, count me in. The event unfolded on a weekend when the rain in Portland took a brief respite, allowing rare sunlight to pour through the shop's expansive windows. Many gathered, contributing books, purchasing vintage titles from Powell's, and attentively listening as Emily and Alexander conveyed the Hug Foundation's mission. Children from the mobile library arrived as well, holding their beloved books and sharing their tales, evoking deep emotions in many. As the day drew to a close, they had gathered sufficient support to keep the organization afloat for another 6 months. Emily found herself in Powell's, surveying the crowd, overwhelmed by a sense of pride she had never experienced before. As the event came to a close, Alexander made his way over to her, cradling 2 Stumptown coffees, a familiar ritual they shared. With a smile, he handed her one, and we accomplished it. Emily grasped the cup, met his gaze, and remarked, It's not about what we've done, it's about the journey we're beginning. This marks merely the beginning of the journey. He nodded, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. Then I shall accompany you, one step at a time. In the heart of Powell's, surrounded by time-worn shelves and the warmth of shared laughter, they were transformed from two fractured souls into individuals who had discovered a deeper meaning, not only for themselves but for those around them. The Hug Foundation represented more than an organization. It embodied a commitment that no individual would ever have to face their darkest moments in solitude as they once did. Chapter 8 Epilogue The Alley That Sparked Everything. 3 years had gone by since Emily and Alexander found each other again in Seattle, and Portland now pulsed with fresh energy, not only due to the arrival of autumn with its fiery red maple leaves, but also because something deeper had emerged from the narrow alley behind St. Mary's Church. What was once a shadowy wet nook where Emily had embraced a stranger amidst the rain had transformed into a lively space adorned with colorful murals, scattered books, intertwined hands, and a prominent wooden sign that read, "Hug Alley Where Healing Begins." The concept emerged from Emily soon after the establishment of the Hug Foundation, aiming to turn their beginnings into a beacon for those seeking a hug, a kind word, or merely a space to feel less isolated. Alexander, with his pragmatic approach, brought it to fruition. Local artists were commissioned to adorn the walls with their creativity, solar-powered streetlights were installed, and the alley was transformed into a serene Portland spot, inviting visitors to pause, share uplifting messages on the walls, or take a moment of contemplation on the wooden benches thoughtfully arranged for reflection. On that day, the city celebrated its third annual Hug Day, an event organized by Emily and Alexander to encourage small acts of kindness throughout the community. Powell's books came alive with laughter and chatter as hundreds assembled, contributing books, exchanging free hugs, or inscribing messages to display on the kindness wall. Outside the shop, the Hug Foundation had established its presence. Children from the mobile library zipped between the stalls, grasping their beloved books as volunteers distributed donuts from Voodoo Donut and steaming coffee from Stumptown. Emily stood among the throng, clad in a modest gray sweater, cradling a latte, observing the bustling scene with a bright smile. She had shed her former self, no longer the reserved girl lost among the shelves of the bookstore. She belonged to a greater whole, a collective that she and Alexander had forged from their own shattered fragments. Alexander stood close by, grasping the tiny hand of a 1-year-old boy whose light brown hair mirrored his mother's and whose deep blue eyes reflected his father's. This was Oliver, their son, born just over a year ago, a delightful blessing following their decision to dedicate themselves to one another for eternity. Their wedding occurred 2 years prior, modest and understated, in a quaint church in East Portland, attended by just a few close friends. Jade, the bridesmaid, can't help but joke, "I can't believe you married that billionaire." In a heartfelt promise, they would not only cherish one another but also dedicate their lives to serving others. Oliver made his entrance unexpectedly, a delightful young lad with a beaming smile, perpetually toying with the books his mother brought back. Alexander, while still somewhat shy around new faces, had transformed into a somewhat awkward yet dedicated father. He was navigating the challenges of diaper changes, preparing formula, and occasionally belting out off-key lullabies to Oliver in his deep voice, which never failed to make Emily chuckle each time she heard it. Hug Day transcended mere celebration. It served as a poignant reminder of the journey they had embarked upon over the past 3 years. As the elusive Portland sunlight poured through Powell's expansive windows, Emily emerged into Hug Alley, clutching a small note she intended to affix to the wall. She lingered, her eyes tracing the now vibrant and inviting alley, as memories of that initial embrace flooded her mind like a soft whisper of wind. She remembered that stormy evening, crouching next to a shattered soul, unaware of his identity, only that he required a presence. She recalled his muffled cries mingling with the sound of the rain, the way he eased into her embrace, and the wedding ring she had found and tucked into his pocket. In that moment, she believed she was merely aiding a stranger, yet now she understands that the embrace not only lifted Alexander from his shadows but also rescued her from the solitude she had concealed following her own heartaches. She smiled, penned a note that read, "One hug can change everything," and affixed it to the wall, adding to the multitude of other messages dancing in the breeze. Alexander made his way towards her, with Oliver trailing closely behind, tightly holding onto a small children's book he had picked up from a nearby stall. "What occupies your mind?" he inquired, his tone soft yet soothing. Emily turned to him, glancing at him and their son, then said, "That first hug, if I hadn't taken that step, we wouldn't be where we are today. No Hug Alley, no Hug Day, no Oliver." He chuckled gently, leaning down to lift Oliver into his embrace. "I contemplate that daily. You rescued me, Emily, and it wasn't only that evening." She rested her head on his shoulder, absorbing the warmth of both him and Oliver. For the first time in years, she felt complete, not merely due to the love she had discovered, but because she had found purpose, a family, and a means to embrace the world around her. The Hug Foundation, after 3 years, had evolved significantly from its uncertain beginnings. With the help of fundraisers and the community's generosity, they broadened the reach of the mobile library to nearby states such as Washington and Idaho, increased the number of free mental health counseling sessions, and established a small center focused on supporting women after crises, a haven where they could acquire new skills, enjoy reading, or simply discover a safe environment for healing. Emily and Alexander pressed on undeterred. They continued collaborating, now harmonizing their endeavors with the responsibilities of raising Oliver. On certain evenings, they gathered in the modest office of the foundation, with Oliver peacefully slumbering in a crib close by as they brainstormed fresh initiatives. On other occasions, they took him to community gatherings, instilling in him the belief that true joy arises not merely from receiving, but from the act of giving. As Hug Day came to an end, the sun dipped below the hills of Oregon, casting a stunning orange hue across the sky. Emily and Alexander lingered in Hug Alley with Oliver nestled in his stroller beside them, clutching his little book, his eyelids heavy with the weight of sleep. The crowd began to disperse, leaving behind a trail of smiles. An elderly gentleman came forward, expressing his gratitude for the happiness the mobile library had brought to his grandchildren. A young woman embraced Emily, expressing how the Women's Center had empowered her to regain her strength after her husband departed. These moments, though small, held great significance and were the reason they persevered. Emily faced Alexander, gently grasping his hand. "We've accomplished it, haven't we?" He grasped her hand firmly, responding, "No, we're still in this together, and I will be here, by your side, forever." It all started with a warm embrace amidst the falling rain, tucked away in an unnoticed dark alley. Now that alley emerged as a beacon of hope, a testament to kindness, and a love nurtured through shared struggles. Emily gazed at Hug Alley, at Alexander and Oliver, and realized she hadn't merely embraced a stranger once. She embraced the universe with him beside her. She embraced a moment. Now she embraces the world with him alongside her. We appreciate your support as we share this poignant narrative from Soul Stories channel. We'd love to hear your reflections on the story in the comments section below. If you hold the conviction that genuine love can endure any challenge and often starts in the most unassuming manner, be sure to click the like button and share this tale with your friends. Join us in exploring heartfelt and impactful narratives by subscribing to our channel. Together, we can share messages of love and warmth with all. Let us celebrate the exquisite moments of life and affection in unison.